Now to Turkey, which is holding its presidential election runoff on Sunday. The vote pits the incumbent President Recep Tayyip Erdogan against challenger Kemal Kilicdaroglu. Now, President Erdogan performed better than expected in the first round of voting. As our correspondent Julia Hahn reports from Istanbul, the president's rival is now trying to bolster his chances by turning to anti-refugee rhetoric.
Supporters of the Turkish president are celebrating, even before Sunday's runoff vote. No one here doubts that Recep Tayyip Erdogan will make good on his promise during the first election night.
We will continue to serve our nation for the next 5 years.
Erdogan did not secure an outright victory in the first round, but he did better than polls had predicted and came out well ahead of his main opponent. Since then, an ultra-nationalist, third-placed candidate has endorsed Erdogan, calling on his supporters to vote for the incumbent. Most observers here agree that Erdogan has a clear advantage in the runoff. Opposition leader Kemal Kilicdaroglu nevertheless wants to fight for every vote and has changed his strategy at the last minute. He's now presenting himself as a nationalist hardliner and is stirring up anti-refugee sentiment. The opposition has put up new billboards with slogans like "The Syrians will leave." Turkey hosts more refugees than any other country according to the UN, and immigration is a key issue for most political parties. Kilicdaroglu has now decided to make a big point of it, promising to throw out millions of people, relying on xenophobic messages and unsubstantiated figures.
We will not leave our homeland. This mentality that has brought 10 million irregular refugees into our country. The border is our honour. We will not leave our homeland to those who are incapable of protecting our honour, who watch this unruly flow of people infiltrating our veins every day.
Turkey's economy is deeply troubled. Sky-high inflation has led to a cost of living crisis where people can afford less and less. Some politicians claim that migrants and refugees are contributing to the crisis, and more Turks believe it.
I think the migrants should definitely leave. Unemployment and our rents have increased because of them.
Somebody had to speak up and say what people think, because this is what's in our minds. We think they should definitely go. Foreigners benefit from rights that the country should give to its own people. They are being given rights that I don't have.
Nevertheless, political analyst Berk Essen does not believe that the new hardline strategy will help Kilicdaroglu win against Erdogan.
The main opposition candidate is trying to lure his nationalist supporters by adopting a very nationalist discourse. But it also seems that the opposition candidate is in free fall, that he has made a major U-turn after the first round, and that probably this message is not going to really come across as credible.
Another problem for the opposition here in Turkey is the lack of equal opportunity before elections. President Erdogan has secured more and more powers for himself over the years. He controls state funds and the judiciary. He has jailed political rivals, and the country's media is overwhelmingly pro-government. International observers say the elections here are largely free, but not fair. Data from Turkey's media watchdog show that state TV has reported on President Erdogan for 49 hours in recent weeks. His challenger received only 32 minutes of airtime in the same period. In this broadcast, the imbalance was as clear as day. The presenter explained in detail how to vote in the runoff, only showing Erdogan. The opposition candidate wasn't even mentioned.
The system is still at least electorally competitive, but because of the uneven playing field between the ruling party and the opposition parties, because of the fact that government has full control over the judiciary, the bureaucracy, as well as much of the national media, the opposition faces an uphill battle in prevailing in the elections, and that's why the system is authoritarian.
In the duel between Erdogan and Kilicdaroglu, the incumbent therefore seems to have the better chances. But only after Sunday's vote we will know whether Erdogan's supporters have celebrated too early.
Well, our correspondent Julia Hahn in Istanbul told me that Kemal Kilicdaroglu has a lot of catching up to do.
Well, Kilicdaroglu has to close a seemingly insurmountable gap with incumbent President Erdogan on Sunday if he wants to win. Erdogan emerged from the first round of voting with a lead of about 2.5 million votes. That's a lot, although Erdogan did not secure outright victory. So now the opposition is really desperately searching for more support, especially among hardline nationalist voters, because they really could be decisive on Sunday. What really stands out for me and what came quite as a surprise is how quickly Kilicdaroglu's campaign has swung from all the talk of democratic values, pluralism and heart-shaped emojis to this more aggressive tone, diving into far-right waters with all the anti-refugee sentiment. My explanation is that the opposition probably came to the conclusion that they cannot win this election with an issues-based campaign, focusing, for example, exclusively on repairing the broken economy. They cannot win like this against a populist leader like Erdogan, who is very much about identity politics, who has attacked his political rivals, who has repeatedly accused Kemal Kilicdaroglu of receiving his orders from PKK terrorists. So what we have seen now is the opposition basically mimicking Erdogan's aggressive style. Right. It will probably help them. The question is how much, and will it be enough to win on Sunday?
OK, and so what are voters expecting from Sunday?
Well, it's going to be a tight race again. Turkey is very much polarized. At least half of the population here want change after more than 20 years of Erdogan, especially young voters. So this really is some sort of referendum on Erdogan's transformative but divisive rule. The winner on Sunday needs at least 50% of the votes. But I guess the real challenge now is to really get people to head to the ballot boxes one more time and to cast their votes. And I guess that will be more difficult for the opposition because their supporters have really been very disappointed, disillusioned after the first round where they expected their candidate to win already. And Erdogan now enters the runoff as the favorite with a clear advantage because his ruling AKP also and their alliance also secured a majority in parliament. So he has an advantage there.
And this is an election that is being watched closely, not just in Turkey, but around the world. Why is it so important externally?
Well, Turkey, of course, is a NATO member. It is a geostrategic regional player between Europe and Asia. This election will really determine where the country's political system is headed, where the economy is headed. What about its foreign policy? Because the opposition has made some very bold promises there, returning to parliamentary democracy, restoring and renewing Turkish democracy, turning towards the West, repairing an ailing economy. It's a very different vision for the country. And some observers say this election will also show people around the world whether autocratic leaders like President Erdogan can be defeated at the ballot box.
Thank you so much for that, Julia Hahn in Istanbul. Well, President Erdogan enjoys strong support from the estimated 7 million ethnic Turks living here in Germany. So how does Berlin feel about the prospect of another 5 years of a man who hasn't been shy of criticising the German government? Tobias Bacherler is a member of the Greens, the second biggest party in Germany's governing coalition, and the party of the country's foreign minister. Welcome to DW. Now, your party has been very critical of President Erdogan. Now we see his rivals spouting all this anti-migrant rhetoric. Are you still as keen for him to win as you were earlier this month?
Of course, this is very concerning what you just described and what we've just heard, that this right-wing shift is now dominating the second round of the election. And now right-wing voters will actually, well, make the difference in the end. But after all, we must see that this election is not only about the policies, but also about the political system and whether Turkey is going to go back to a, well, more democratic parliamentarian system. So I think those are two dimensions of these elections, and I'm still looking at the second dimension, and I'm still very keen on the idea that Turkey is going to, well, fade away or turn away from the authoritarian approach, the approach to the very, very presidential system.
So I'd like to be clear then on your party stance. So does your party still support Mr. Kilicdaroglu despite his anti-migrant rhetoric?
I think that's very important to look what our stance was. We really believe that this is a very important chance to turn around. We never really said we are going to support one candidate nor his policies. And of course,
let me interrupt you.
As you said, those policies we do not support.
Please, and read you
Yes.
a statement from Ricardo Lang, the federal chairman of the Greens and a member of the parliament. So this is the chair of your party. We stand by those who are fighting for democracy, the rule of law and equality and human rights in Turkey. After years of authoritarian leadership under President Erdogan, there's a real chance of a return to democracy and the rule of law. We are asking everyone who is a resident of Germany and eligible to vote in Turkey to vote in the presidential elections and support the process of democratic change. I call for the election of the HDP under the umbrella of our sister party, the Green Left. So that's definitely anti-Erdogan. So can I just ask you to just give me a straight yes or no? Are you still supporting Kilicdaroglu despite his anti-migrant rhetoric?
Well, we supported our sister party, the HDP, and we are still supporting everyone who's voting against Erdogan. But that's very, very different than supporting the candidate and his policies. Again, two dimensions, and on the second dimension, the dimension of institutions, democracy, we are still in belief that this is the one chance Turkey has to turn around.
Mr. Erdogan has often been a thorn in the sides of Berlin and of Brussels. How should Germany and indeed the EU view the prospect of another 5 years of this Turkish president?
Well, it's going to be, or it would be, 5 more very challenging years. We are seeing this now with the new members, or we would like to have 2 new members to the NATO. Turkey is very critical of that, blockading that. So, of course, those struggles are going to continue and we are still going to face them. But I still believe that we will, well, continue like we have been before.
Thank you for joining us. Tobias Bahela from Germany's Green Party.
Thank you very much.
Many people, especially Syrians, now face fear for their safety and place in Turkish society. DW's Aya Ibrahim met with some of them in Istanbul.
In a previous life, Bayan Ağa was an architect. She now helps run YOLO, a cultural center and cafe she started in Istanbul. Here, Bayan hosts concerts, group therapy sessions, art workshops, karaoke, open mic, and stand-up comedy nights. At YOLO, everyone is welcome, she says. But a lot of the events on the program cater to Arabic speakers like herself.
It came from a personal need and wish. There was no space where we could meet people, learn something in Arabic. So I thought, why shouldn't we be the ones that create that space? We reached a point where we were tired of the pressure of having to explain ourselves as individuals, as Syrians. We're here trying to build ourselves from nothing.
Bayan came to Turkey from Syria as a refugee. She worked for almost a decade before she and a partner had gathered enough funds to start YOLO. It's short for You Only Live Once. But for many refugees and Arab migrants, it's a lifeline, a place where they can escape a society that's grown increasingly hostile to them.
I don't want people to come here and hear the same things they hear at home, at work, on TV, on public transportation. I don't want them to get the same looks they get outside, especially people that are visibly Syrian. No one will be comfortable in a place where it's so public that you are not welcome. These election placards are on the streets. It's no longer hidden or indirect.
Throughout Turkey's current election campaign, Bayan has watched the media scapegoat Syrians and migrants for the country's economic woes. Even though she has now become a Turkish citizen, she still feels excluded.
Regardless of my legal status, in the end I'm considered Syrian. I'm the direct target of hate speech. I sometimes think to myself, it is still better that I am here, because if I had stayed in Syria, I don't know if I would still be alive. I think like this to make myself go on, to motivate myself.
Both candidates in Turkey's presidential election have made promises to send Syrian refugees back to their homes, whether through deportation or voluntary return. The topic of migration is omnipresent in this election campaign, yet we struggle to find Syrian refugees willing to speak to us about it on camera. Sammy's experience in Turkey perhaps explains why. The 26-year-old agreed to speak to us only if we conceal his identity. He's a Syrian journalist with a residence permit that needs to be renewed every year.
When I step out of the house, I try as much as I can to hide my Syrian identity. I try not to speak Arabic in public.
He's been told off for speaking Arabic in public before, and is worried these tensions might escalate. Across the country, there are rising reports of violence against Syrians.
I feel like if things reach that scenario, I don't have any legal protection. No one will stand up for my rights. As a Syrian refugee in Turkish society, I feel I have no value.
Back in Yolo, it's a full house. Tonight's topic of discussion is how to deal with nagging in relationships. The place feels worlds away from the polarized atmosphere right outside the door, much to the relief of patrons and staff.
It's a safe place. We feel like at home here.
YOLO Art was the only place where I can be myself and at the same time embrace my culture and have fun.